Penny and Julie, thanks so much for coming on and having a chat. How's SouthStart been so far?
When you get to hang out with your friend and do work, what could be better than that?
That's awesome.
It's a beautiful city, and the people are awesome. There's been so much hospitality. As I said, I know it's summer here. It doesn't feel like summer, but it does feel like a San Francisco summer, so I feel at home.
Had you been to Adelaide before?
No, my first time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you had a few days here, or?
Day and a half.
Okay. Are you hanging around for the weekend, for the wine, or?
Unfortunately, Penny and I are going to Melbourne for a wedding.
We just travel around Australia together.
Nice.
Yeah. We come as a duo. We should.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good gig. So,
BKindred and ta-da.
That's exactly right.
And you kind of work in similar spaces as well, in regards to... No?
I think we share a lot of similar passions.
Okay.
But we work in quite different spaces.
I also think we share and learn from one another.
Oh, huge. Yeah. Julie makes me look at the world through a different lens.
That's really important to do that, though, isn't it? And have people that can force you to do that, I suppose, or give you the glasses to actually see things through different eyes.
Where's the fun in people who agree with you? For me, it doesn't, I grow better when people challenge my thinking and help me wear a different set of glasses.
And I also think the sharing and listening, Penny, I'm going sideways. What do I, to have a great pair of ears and to hold space for one another.
We've been talking a lot today about in a business setting or in sort of a founder setting, but actually needing to have space where you can have real conversations with people and share, more than just kind of the trivialities. So actually, we've talked before about, emotion and people, especially in business, being afraid to sort of talk about, the bad times or, feeling like shit and the things aren't going that way. And I think often, as a business owner, you do worry about talking about that stuff, but it's so important on a human level to do that.
It's so interesting that you raise that, because if I talk about what Jules and I have done recently together, so Jules recently hosted an event that I run at muru-D, which is called Humanizing the Future of Work. And what we do is we create the space for business leaders, heads of education and children between the ages of 15 and 17 to come together and have conversations around what it means to be human in the future.
Yeah, cool.
Because they are the future.
Because they are the future.
I sat in one of her sessions and I was so excited. I'm like, you need kids in here. It's the other point of view.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you spoke about is in terms of holding space. So there's a program that we run called the Fearless Masterclass, and I run it with kids but also large corporations. And what we do is we create space for people to talk about what's really going on. And I can't tell you how desperate people are for that space. And equally, I can't tell you how happy I am to have created these programs, but equally how sad it makes me when I hear what people are carrying and showing up with every day that no one knows about.
Yeah, sure.
From suicides in families to breast cancer that no one in the office knows about,
wow.
to wives with depression, to a son who's had 3 of his mates suicide in the last 12 months. Like, every time we run this program, people will sit in front of 60 peers. And as soon as you create a safe space for fear to be shared, it's like people are just desperate to put it on the table.
We did something similar also with our founders at muru-D, where we stood around in a circle and the facilitator said, write one thing down that nobody knows about that you're holding on to. And it was similar to everything to, I think I need to fire my co-founder. I'm severely depressed. I don't think I'm going to make payroll next week. And so they just wrote it down anonymously on a piece of paper, put it in the middle, and then we read them one by one. We didn't know who was who. But people were looking around and saying, I could have written 7 of those things. And there was this aha moment of connection saying, oh my God, I'm not alone at this. And so we created a space with our founders that they could share that. And every Friday they can share what they're going through and a sense of connection and not feeling so alone in it.
That's really cathartic, getting it out, right? Like, I think that's a lot of baggage that people are sort of carrying around with them.
I also want to say we also did the flip side, like things that are actually really going awesome. We had to balance that out. And so it was like you could share the wins and you can share the things that are just going sideways.
Yeah, and it's creating space, isn't it? It is.
Well, I used to think, my title is, I call myself a happiness hacker. And when I first started running these programs with large groups and doing this stuff, within half an hour people would start crying.
Okay.
Yeah, because we were holding space and creating space for people to share what was really going on. And I was like, oh my God, I'm shit at this. I'm not making people happy, I'm actually making them sad. But what I realised was I wasn't making them sad.
No.
I was giving them the opportunity to turn up as who they really were and normalise what's going on in our society. And I find it fascinating that so many of us are carrying the same things, but we're so afraid of the judgment of others or being perceived as weak.
Yep.
And even with so much awareness around mental health and stuff now, it is still a massive issue where people are wearing masks.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head by saying the judgment and owning their shit. Like, that's where I feel safe. I can call you and say, hey, Penny, things are going sideways. I own it. I've done this. I also have, that voice that I feel is yelling at me, and I've actually named her Beatrice.
Nice.
She's like my second friend.
She's around. She's getting a lot of play. She's getting a lot of airtime. But maybe that'll quiet her down a little bit. And it's that judgment thing where not having that or lessening it makes things a little bit easier. But to your point about people crying, you've cracked things open.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. I get to watch her after her events, how she's beaming and cracked open, and oh my God, this is awesome, and there's happiness happening, and I can do this.
I've been really surprised in my career with staff that, you hear about something that's been happening in their life, and it's got to a point where they've had to tell me for whatever reason, but it's been sort of months of this happening. And a couple of times it's happened where their performance has been going down, and I've actually pulled them aside and been like, what's happening? And, whatever it might be. And it's like, why didn't you tell me? Like, why didn't you tell me earlier? Like, and I think for whatever reason, we have a fairly open kind of place to work where I would hope people would feel comfortable telling me, but people do just hold things back and don't feel like the workplace is somewhere where you should, express whatever that is.
One of the things that we do with my team meeting, we do a one-word check-in. Okay. So instead of everyone telling how their day is, it's what's your one word, how are you showing up right now? And it can be everything from I'm excited, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm not feeling well, I'm hungry. And so after the meeting or during the meeting, you know where things are coming from when they're sharing their update.
Sure.
And how frustrated it is. And as a teammate, you can go and say, hey, how can I help you be less overwhelmed? How can I, make you more happy? Or that's so awesome that you're, succeeding at all the things that your targets.
We need more curious conversations.
Yeah.
We've conditioned ourselves, especially as grown-ups, to not be curious anymore. And I challenge people now, what if we actually went into some conversations that were tense conversations, and rather than go into those conversations seeking to put our opinions and our views and our advice on the table, what if you just sought to understand the perspective of the other person? What if you just created space for them to share where they were at and what was really going on for them and how they were feeling about the tension between the two of you? Allow yourself to put yourself in their shoes. How often do we do that?
Not very often, and most people go into conversations with, with a point they want to get across or something, and don't listen either. They just sit there and...
Well, they're constantly thinking about the next thing they're going to say, so they're not even taking in what's being said. And then you wonder why we end up with frustration. We're probably missing about 80% of the messages that are coming at us.
And I know, I wasn't in your talk, but I know that you were talking about, how technology is playing a part in I suppose, changing the way we think and we communicate and we actually interact as humans. I had a chat with an older gentleman last night, but we were talking about, having grown up without these, and then, now it's such a part of my life. I can feel my attention span has changed in the last 10 years. Like it physically has. And I was asking him, I think he was about 55, and he said the same thing. He said, it's dramatic actually how much he feels his attention span has changed. And, the things that, even just reading a book, I read a book now, and, I find it very hard to lose myself in it because I'm thinking, I need to check Instagram, or I need to check my email, or whatever it might be. Actually switching off and just having a conversation. That's why I love these podcasts, because generally I'm not looking at my phone. David doesn't let me look at my phone because you actually can just tune in and get out of the sort of constant updates and notifications that are constantly bubbling up.
So I think, sorry, Jules.
I was just going to say, it's powerful in silence. Like listening to someone and not having to be on and have to say the next right, brilliant thing.
I totally agree with you, but what concerns me about what you just said, you're of a generation that's not probably dissimilar to mine. I'm 43. How old are you?
35.
35, Jules?
I'm older than you.
Okay. So that said, I've got an 8-year-old. And so think of a generation that doesn't have that point of comparison.
I know.
Right? So they've never had that opportunity to know what it's like to be in a different state of disruption, to live without that technology constantly disrupting yourself. And I think that's where my biggest concern comes in when I observe him, when I observe his friends. They have, without that point of comparison, how do you help them understand the benefits of actually disconnecting time, creating disconnected time and sitting in the stillness and getting bored. You know, these kids feel every single space now. And not being bored and being in stillness from a mental health perspective, but equally from an opportunity perspective to innovate, and disrupt and do things differently and you know, challenge yourself. I think it's concerning.
And what how do we deal with that? How on a like parental level? So how do you broach it? Because I've got mates with, I don't have kids, but you know, it's difficult to try and tell them that take the iPad away. Why are you taking the iPad away? Yeah.
So I am by no means professing to be the perfect parent.
Sure.
I'm just professing to be a parent who tries.
Yeah.
And so with the intent of trying, and there's a few things that I have done. So iPads are not a given in my house. I know too much about how they're designed for addiction and attention. So we only allow an hour a day on a weekend. He can't have it during the week. Now, and even taking that off him is a real problem, because what you find is that, again, designed for addiction, nothing that they play on an iPad or a device ends. So they never feel like they're finished, right? So it's no different from giving them crack, seriously, in terms of the behavioural response.
Sure.
So we can find the time that he has it. Equally, I've had to actually text, I'm the pain in the ass parent that actually texted other parents and told them to not send their kids over with tech. Okay. Because we had kids turning up for play dates that would be on the doorstep with all their tech. Some kids would have 3 devices.
Wow.
And I just said, I'm sorry, like, we've got devices, and I've got no problem at the end of the day when they want to chill out and watch some YouTube if they've been active and outdoors all day. Yeah. But I'm not having kids come over here and sit next to my son and play on a device and call that play or engagement. So that's, and the other thing I've become really active in trying to pursue is I play soccer with my son every night after school. So how do we get outside and do things out in nature? Yeah. We started hiking, we started camping, and he loves it. But it's just being proactive in getting them to get outside and have the balance between the two.
And I think that, I mean, just outside of the physical sitting there and looking at it, it's, you know, how are they going to, when he gets into high school, you know, actually interact at school with their friends? You know, a lot of that is actually just happening on the device itself. You know, does it change in the way kids are, you know, making friends and making connections and actually, you know, I suppose changing the way they're growing up, essentially, isn't it?
Fundamentally.
Yeah, I worry about the bullying, the
Sure.
digital bullying. Yeah. I luckily, you know, didn't have it going to school, and when I was teaching, they didn't have the devices either, so I didn't have to deal with it. I had to deal with real life bullying. But it's a way to be behind, be anonymous, and the trolls, the bullying, and there's an opportunity there to teach kids more about stepping in and stepping up. You know, it's just as easy it is to be a bully. Can we make it just as easy to call out bullying, as well as, you know, the critical thinking skills that we need on what's everything that's out there, to knowing what's real, what's fake, what's, you know, how we should be looking at the news that we're reading, what's, you know, really being able to have the critical thinking skills.
You talked before about listening and about, you know, these bubbles that we're going to get caught in on whatever social media or what do they call the you know, like the cocoon, that feedback loop. You're only hearing sort of, you know, your opinion and not actually echo chamber. One of the things that I was taught growing up was that, you know, you should be looking, you should be reading, you know, different articles about things and actually critically thinking about whatever it is, the news, the world around you, and listening to different perspectives. And I think, you know, things like travel and travel is a big one for me, I think. Actually going overseas and seeing, you know, different cultures, and you start thinking, okay, well, it's not just a bubble that I live in Adelaide, that's the be all and end all of the world. And, you know, we're all doing the same kinds of things, but in different ways. And I think people are getting a bit lost in that echo chamber on the devices and can't really see past it. I mean, obviously you can see some of the recent world events, you know, how that can be manipulated as well, which is frightening.
If you're not surprising yourself on a regular basis, then I would say you're not being curious enough and you're not stepping out of that bubble. Yeah. You know, surprising yourself means constantly challenging your perspectives, constantly asking yourself, if I was wrong about this, what sort of questions would I be asking myself? I think so much of us believe that our experiences and the opinions that we hold are actually facts. And, you know, the experience that we have in the world is so minuscule comparative to what the world is. So if we come from a positive foundation of saying, you know, what if everything I know is actually wrong, or I challenged everything that I know?
And creating new synapses, so the biological changing, creating the neurons and the connections and the new synapses is growth.
Right.
And it's what you said before. It's staying curious. Like, and how do we teach, especially young kids, I think, because they obviously have curiosity sort of built in, right? That's something
and they
that
can teach us.
Yeah,
we get older, we forget that whole growth mindset, and we get in this fixed mindset. That's why I was so excited to make sure Penny had kids at the next event, because to the aha moments, which was fun. First of all, it was fun to watch the adults saying, "Oh my God, these kids are so smart," but the kids on the flip side were saying, "They're actually listening to me." So it's creating that sense of confidence, which was really exciting for me to see as well.
Oh.
But human connection is fundamentally lacking in the next generation. So they are unbelievably, I say, intelligent beyond any generation that's gone before them. They've got more access to knowledge than they've ever had.
Yep.
But when you ask them where they get their knowledge from a curiosity perspective, where do you think most of them get their knowledge from? Google. Google. Yeah. Okay. And so when you search Google, what comes to the top of the feed?
Ads.
Yeah. Things that are paid for, things that are new, or things that are clicked on the most.
Sure.
Is that necessarily what the truth is? Is that necessarily the facts? And this is what you're using to build your knowledge. And so I'm not saying don't use Google, but in terms of exploring curiosity, and especially in the next generation, look at the diversity of the approach with which you explore curiosity, How much curiosity can be found in connecting with random strangers, people who think fundamentally different from you or challenge your thinking? Are there podcasts you can listen to? Are there books you can read? Can you attend industry events that are fundamentally different from anything you currently do that are unrelated, and just see what happens? Yeah, so I think in terms of exploring curiosity, especially in the next generation, we need to shift our mindsets and diversify to really start to challenge some of the beliefs that we hold. But human connection, as I said earlier, is also a huge opportunity. Young people are extremely, extremely smart, but unfortunately by the way they engage with technology and use it as sort of the go-to for everything, it's diminishing skills that are innately human. And because they're not humanly connecting as much as our generation did, it impacts their ability, to build resilience, to problem solve, to have difficult conversations, to feel connected. The rate of loneliness in young people is really high, but they're on their phones all the time.
Connected.
Well, we are wired for human connection, but again, it's something that's been significantly diminished.
It's kind of frightening looking forward to how that is going to play out, because, and you can see it, I think, with talking to some of the younger generation, because they do have all this, they have that power and knowledge, and they're so, especially in the fields we are, design, tech, they're really skilled. But then you put them in a meeting, or you put them in sort of something that's a bit outside of their comfort zone, and it's harder for them to function, I think.
We did some research recently where I was very curious on how young people looked at the future, and so we went out to 80 kids between the ages of 14 and 17 in Melbourne and Sydney, and we asked them to complete the statement in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was fascinating what they came back with. There was no conditions other than complete the statement. And so the themes that came out of that absolutely blew me away. First of all, they were extremely concerned about the damage we were doing to the environment, and they fundamentally believed that we would destroy the earth. That was disturbing. They're extremely concerned about a lack of opportunity in a world where automation takes over and does the bulk of the work. And to be quite honest, that's not unfounded. We know at the moment that 50% of kids under the age of 25 can't get full-time work. Perhaps the most disturbing theme that came out of the whole thing that I had never seen before and was blown away by was they were very concerned about finding love in a world where it was all done online and everyone was replaceable. These were kids thinking about finding meaningful relationships.
What age bracket were they?
They were 14 to 17.
Wow.
And I just, that broke my heart.
Yeah.
It's like, what if... Yes, there's a real convenience with online dating, and I can see there's benefits of it, but equally, what has it done to the replaceability of people?
Yeah.
And also, what's it done to people's confidence? Like you say, what amount of bullying goes on in that space?
I couldn't imagine. And you're right, it's so easy to hide behind, a handle or whatever it is.
And find something next. So for online dating, you're not meeting all of my 10 requirements.
Yeah.
Next. Who else? Swipe. Next.
And we don't give people, I think also the thing that happens with that as well, we don't give people a chance anymore. Yeah, I think we were a lot more tolerant of people and giving them a chance in the days when they weren't as replaceable, whereas now it's like, I've got friends, they go on a date with someone, they go, he had this annoying habit. And it's like, well, when you used to meet someone in a bar, it was a lot harder work, yeah? So it's like, damn, if I've got to find someone else, I'm going to invest a little bit to see where this might go. Whereas now, people aren't as willing to invest in one another as they used to be because they can just find someone else.
If you talk to anybody that's been married for 40, 50, 60 years, then one of the first things they always say is, it hasn't been an easy road. We've had to work on this. And you have to work on human relationships, right? It's not, it takes two to tango, and you actually have to, give and take and work through those bumps. It's not just, replaceable onto the next.
No.
Or Photoshop it, or take the perfect selfie and add the filters.
And that stuff's, I think, frightening too, and how I couldn't imagine. I think, especially being a girl, but boys too, in high school, the pecking order that you had at high school without these things, but then you've also got this digital world that they live in, in parallel to high school, where, how many likes do I have? Who's like this? Oh, this photo didn't, and it's a real, I don't know, it would consume you, I think.
Well, what it's done is it's basically meant that everyone now needs to have a personal brand.
Yeah.
So these young kids now, basically with their Instagram profiles, without even realising it, they're branding themselves.
And they're very good at it too.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, because we do marketing as well. I've noticed that some marketers, they've got such great personal brands, young people, but then they don't actually think about it. They don't go, well, I could transfer these skills that I've been using for my personal stuff across to marketing for somebody else.
Business.
Because they don't actually really see it as, I'm working on my personal brand, even though
No.
they really are.
But how real is the personal brand?
No, I mean, it's not that real at all. It's kind of a
Marketing.
Yeah, basically. But it's a projection, right? This is sort of how I want my life to be seen.
How does it make... But if we're all trying to be perfect and we're trying to portray this perfect image, and the reality is being human is all about imperfection, what does it do? What does it do up here? What does it do to our minds?
Well, it's the definition of perfection. It's the social online media is making this perfect.
Wait until the bifurcation of humanity comes in. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Well, so with genetic modification now, that...
Oh, sure.
They're basically saying, people with money in the future will be able to
blue
not only
eyes.
choose blue eyes, but level of intelligence, remove physical disabilities or, anything like that.
Beatrice, remove Beatrice.
So what they're saying is that, basically we will have multiple factions of humanity where it will be like having, humans that are Great Danes versus poodles, and the level of attraction between that, the diversification of humanity will actually, we won't want to engage with one another because we will be so different. It will be the perfect race, and then there'll be us who are the naturals.
It essentially creates a subspecies.
And the tech is already there.
Yeah, and it's the same with sort of, AI, or, if we can start integrating computers into it, so you can have sort of a cast of humans that are kind of it's sci-fi stuff, but it's actually not that far off being reality.
Well, we already have cyborgs. So in America, there's the cyborg games, and at the moment, we are currently using robotics and artificial intelligence to do amazing things with people who have severe disabilities.
Sure.
And that's what I say. I think there's unbelievable things we can do with technology that we should not stop because they give people opportunities and help people with disabilities to do things they've never been able to do. But where does the ethical piece come in? Yeah. And who decides what's right and wrong and where this will be taken? And I don't think as a society we are anywhere near where we need to be able to navigate that at the moment.
No, and similar conversation around this tech world we live in. We haven't been in it long enough to be able. How do we regulate it? Who regulates it? Is it on us to do that, or?
So what do we have to do? Wait until it all fucks up before?
I don't know. Yeah.
What do you think, John?
Well, I mean, also thinking the kids that are born, that were born, when was the iPhone came out in 2007?
7, yeah.
So they've been born with it, and they don't know any difference. And kids that are going up to TVs and touching them and getting things to move. How about the rotary phone? These kind of things where we grew up. It's a very different world.
Well, also fine motor skills.
Yeah.
So how does the fact that everything's kind of touch screen? I've got so many examples of friends that have said to me, I've got a 2 or 3 year old and they've been given a book for the first time and they start trying to expand the book on the front cover because they don't know how to turn the pages. You laugh, but that is the reality because they're so used to using a device rather than things that actually require them, to use their fingers in a way that's different.
On a flip side, because obviously, times change, right? And over, and humans evolve too. Is this the path that we are destined to take? Is this what's going to happen? Like, does the childhood that we have become a thing of just memory?
Technology is a mirror of humanity, and technology will only ever do what we want it to do.
Yep.
I don't have a problem with evolution. I think that we can't stop technology because it's going to solve so many world problems that if we can solve them, we have to solve them. We should solve them. My problem is that we bring consciousness and intention into that process, and at the moment, I don't think there's anywhere near enough of it.
And I keep going to the problem-solving critical thinking. So when I was in first grade, I was taught to use an abacus.
Yep.
Okay, and then we were able to use calculators, but understanding how the math works. So understanding how the computer works, understanding how the websites are getting made, the technology is made, is those critical thinking skills rather than just getting your hands on the technology and assuming it works. So there are these. If it breaks, you know how to fix it. You know how to hack it. What happens if you don't have it? What happens if the Wi-Fi goes down?
Yeah.
Life can go on.
Which I think is even more important, especially in the context of something like machine learning. So with machine learning, you've got two options in the way that you develop it, from my understanding. Yeah? You can either develop it so that you always understand the algorithms and you always know how it arrived at the decision.
Yep.
But there are many people, in terms of the machine learning that they're creating, where the machine continues to teach itself, and it gets to a point where no one actually knows how it's arrived at the decision because it's kept self-learning.
Building its own algorithms, yeah.
And then if you're using that for things like sentencing of criminals or how to give patients treatment in a hospital, and you're on the receiving end of, hey, this is the treatment you're going to get, and you sit there go, I actually don't want that for my family member.
No.
And the person telling you this says, well, that's what it is, that's what the computer says. And you say, well, help me understand that. How did the computer arrive at that decision?
We don't know.
Yeah, so I don't know. Is that a level of control that you want to give over to artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
It scares me.
It is scary.
But then overlay with that, right, the fact that we know, for example, AI can make decisions with machine learning, for example, in patient treatment, at a 95% accuracy, and humans can do it, say, at 60%. And yet we would rather take the inaccuracy of a human at 60% than put the trust and control in AI at 95% accuracy.
Let me go back to the accountability piece then. Allowing computers to make the decisions for us. The accountability is then put on somewhere else. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, there's a lot of times, sometimes I don't want to make the decisions and I'd love someone else to make it. And then I can blame someone else that fucks up.
Yep.
But I actually also, I'm at an age and a stage and experience that I know when to own my shit. And that's empowering.
Yeah, and it's understanding what level of control do we want AI to have, and if we're comfortable
and we
with
do
it.
control that. So
and that's what I say. It's just consciousness and intention. It's thinking through these challenges and saying, well, what are the implications of that happening, and what decisions are we going to make?
It's exciting. I mean, it's scary, and there's a lot of scary stuff out there, but it's also exciting. I think.
Usually.
It's going to be an interesting future. I'm looking forward to it. But I think, I think we definitely have to make some conscious decisions about how we do interact with technology and follow through on it too. I think it's some of those things that we start having these conversations and you go back to the feed.
Yep, absolutely. Turn it off.
Yeah.
Create space in your day to turn off.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the chat.
Thank you.